Hey there, this is Miss Padberg. I'm here to tell you about taking and using visual note-taking strategies. There are some benefits that I wanted to point out, that this note-taking strategy does use both sides of the brain. It allows you to create mental pictures of spatial information. This is going to be really good for physical geography, things that you're going to see on a map. There are some challenges to this type of note-taking strategy, and I'll be showing you how to do some modifications later on. But some of the challenges is, for a lot of people, this appears very chaotic or messy. The words don't seem to have any actual structure on the page, and it can often be overcrowded with lots of color and symbols, making it a little bit harder to pick out the information. But for people who are more spatial, this is definitely going to be a strategy that you may want to consider using in the future. The most important thing in any note-taking strategy is that you always start with the text. The point of notes is to remember information from a source. In this case, our source is going to be our online textbook, and so you're going to want to always refer back to the reading when you're trying to find out the most important details. And after you've read the text, then the idea is that you are going to create notes, and in this case we're using Notability, and you're going to create the notes that will allow you to pull out the main idea and the specific details so that you can study them later on. With a visual note-taking strategy, as you read through the text, you're going to want to be noticing the main ideas, but then you're also going to want to think about either a symbol or a location, a spatial relationship that you can use when you're creating this on the map. So as we were reading through the information about physical features, we saw that there was mention of mountains, the Arctic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, shield, and plains. And so as I'm going through and reading this, I'm going to be thinking about adding mountains to my notes and or labeling items like the Arctic Ocean using a color that is going to match the information. I can also record images. For example, this is talking about the Gulf of Mexico, and so I can draw Florida and the shape it creates as it creates the Gulf of Mexico. And then I can also label things with images, like the idea of glaciers and the scraping of glaciers across the eastern and central part of Canada. The next section we read was about Canada and Alaska, the northern part of this region. And as we read, we saw that there was a term called the Canadian Shield that covers half of Canada. We also saw mention of the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence River, Hudson Bay, the Arctic Circle, Baffin Island, the Grand Banks. So again, names and locations are going to be important because I'm going to want to put those on my map or in my notes in that general location. Also, anytime that you see numbers, that should be a clue to your brain to say that should be something I pay attention to. So as I am thinking about taking my notes, if I'm talking about water features like the Great Lakes, then I might consider a blue color. We talked in class about the fact that the Great Lakes tend to look a little bit like a palm tree. So I might draw them and start to keep that shape in my head. And then I can think about Hudson Bay and the shape of Hudson Bay as it's created, as well as a label with a name. And then noting things like Mount McKinley, which in my mountain range I could do the peak, and at the highest peak include that number and name. The final part of the reading that we did together in class had to do with the lower portion of the region, the continental United States. This mentions the mountain ranges of the Rockies and the Appalachians. It also mentions the Great Plains in the center, and then the drainage basin of the Mississippi River, which empties into that Gulf of Mexico. And so again, using a blue color for water, I can draw the Mississippi River. Using another color for land, indicating my Gulf of Mexico, and some other color that could show both the size of the Rocky Mountains in comparison to the size of the Appalachian Mountains. Again, remembering that I do want to make sure that I label my notes so that I have access to that information as well as the visual picture. So an example of what your finished notes might look like is this piece that I did in Notability. Again, you're going to want to notice that I used different size writing for the Rocky Mountains as opposed to the Appalachian Mountains. So again, giving myself that visual. Creating an image that will help me remember the shape. And then also using color to show the different features from water to land to vegetation, etc. So some tips for consideration. Remember to use color purposefully. Select a color that will mean something in your head. When we did our world map, we chose a hot color for the tropics and a cold color for the Arctics. Also consider the size of the words and images. Feel free to pinch and zoom as you are trying to label so that you can get way in there and write something, and then you're able to zoom back out and see that writing and make it all fit. But again, I caution you to be careful and not overdo it. If I start writing too much information all in the same place, then my notes become very jumbled and I don't want to go back and look at them again. So remember that, as you can see clearly in my example, you do not need an artistic talent whatsoever to draw lines or label words. And so the main idea is that you want to put things spatially where they would occur as if this was a map. I'm putting them in relation to each other. So Canada is in the northern part, the United States is in the southern part, the Atlantic Ocean on the east, the Pacific coast on the west, and then again showing where each of these features would appear spatially. So now your homework is to practice this on your own. We read Section 2 physical features together in class, and now you're going to read Section 3 and 4 on climate and vegetation. Remember, start with the text, read the information, and then paragraph by paragraph or section by section, go back to that page in Notability that you started and add visuals, labels, colors, symbols to make those main ideas stand out. As always, let me know if you have any questions.